Imagine being locked away, surrounded by cold stone walls, every echo of footsteps outside your chamber filling you with dread. You know death is coming, but not when, not how, and not with what cruelty. This was Anne Boleyn's reality in May of 1536. Once the most powerful woman in England, the Queen Consort of Henry VIII, she had been reduced to a prisoner in the Tower of London. The irony was merciless. She had once entered those same gates in triumph, crowned and celebrated, only to return as a condemned woman awaiting execution. For 17 long days, Anne endured a psychological torture few could imagine. Every sunrise brought the possibility of her last. Officials postponed her execution more than once, leaving her to spiral deeper into fear. Imagine lying awake in a narrow bed, straining to hear whispers of guards, wondering if today would end with the sharp cold of steel at your neck. These delays were not acts of mercy, but calculated cruelties, designed to break her spirit. Even for a woman as strong-willed and intelligent as Anne, the uncertainty was devastating. When news came that Henry VIII had ordered a French swordsman instead of the usual English axe, many interpreted it as an act of kindness. But was it? The sword, sharper and quicker, meant a cleaner death. Yet beneath this surface of mercy was something more chilling. It was theater. The king wanted to control every last detail of Anne's end, not only her life, but also how she was remembered. A swordsman from Calais would deliver a spectacle that was foreign, dramatic, and unforgettable. To the crowd, it seemed a rare honor, but to Anne, it was a reminder of Henry's absolute dominance. Even the manner of her dying was his to decide. Was this a gift, or was it the final humiliation? A reminder that she had no power left, not even over her death? When Anne finally stepped onto the scaffold, the air was thick with tension. Witnesses would later describe her as calm, even composed, almost as if she were greeting her court instead of death. But beneath that appearance of serenity was something far darker, a psychological survival mechanism. Historians today recognize her words and manner as signs of dissociation, a mind separating itself from unbearable reality. Anne even allowed herself a faint jest, remarking on the smallness of her neck. To the crowd it seemed like courage, even wit, but it was likely the voice of a woman trying desperately to control her fear. Her last speech was carefully measured. She did not confess to crimes she had not committed, but neither did she openly accuse her husband or his ministers. Instead, she submitted to the law, as if acknowledging a faceless force rather than the man who had once sworn to love her. It was a final act of political shrewdness. Anne protected her daughter Elizabeth's future as best she could, even in her last words. Yet, for those who watched, her composure was haunting. Was this the strength of a queen, or the tragic resignation of a woman who knew her voice would soon be silenced forever? The scaffold itself was intentionally small, forcing the crowd to press close. There was no grandeur, no dignity in the arrangement, just a woman exposed before a restless audience. Some came out of morbid curiosity, others to cheer the downfall of a queen they had once adored. This was not justice. It was theater designed to strip Anne of every shred of majesty. Her enemies had arranged every detail to ensure her humiliation. The absence of Henry VIII was striking. The king who had once risked his kingdom for Anne was not even present to see her die. His absence was its own message. She was no longer worthy of his gaze. Instead, her final moments were left to the mob, to the executioner, and to history's pen. The people who gathered at the Tower that morning came not just for justice, but for entertainment. In Tudor England, executions were public theater, meant to terrify, to teach obedience, and to feed curiosity. For Anne's downfall, the scaffold was deliberately built lower than usual, pulling the crowd closer, forcing them to see her not as a queen, but as a mortal woman about to be destroyed. The atmosphere was electric. Murmurs rippled through the audience, some eager for vengeance, others anxious at witnessing the fall of one so recently celebrated. Mothers clutched their children, tradesmen craned their necks, courtiers whispered rumors. To them, this was not a solemn punishment, but a performance orchestrated by the crown. Anne must have felt the weight of every eye upon her. She had once commanded admiration, turning heads at court with her sharp wit and dark beauty. Now those same eyes burned with a mix of fascination and cruelty. In that moment, Anne's true punishment was not the steel of the blade, but the humiliation of dying as a public spectacle, stripped of dignity and reduced to a lesson in obedience. The French executioner had promised a swift strike, yet even the cleanest cut could not erase the horror. As Anne knelt, blindfolded and whispering prayers, the crowd fell into a silence so profound it felt unnatural. Then, in a heartbeat, the blade flashed. Her head fell, but her body betrayed the illusion of mercy. Witnesses later swore her lips moved, her eyes flickered, her hands twitched, fragments of life lingering for a few terrifying moments. These small convulsions haunted those who saw them, proof that even a painless death was not truly so. Have you ever seen something so vivid, so disturbing, that it etched itself into your memory forever? For those who stood at the scaffold that day, Anne's death was not just witnessed, it was seared into their souls. What followed Anne's execution was perhaps the greatest insult of all. Queens were meant to be buried with dignity, wrapped in ceremony and honor. Yet Anne's body was treated with chilling indifference. There was no royal coffin prepared, no solemn procession to a sacred tomb. Instead, her remains were hastily gathered by her ladies-in-waiting, women who adored her but were now trembling, broken shadows of themselves. In desperation, they searched for something, anything, that could serve as a coffin. What they found was a rough arrow chest, a wooden box meant to carry weapons, not the body of a queen. Into this crude container, Anne's head and body were placed, and she was lowered into an unmarked grave within the chapel of St. Peter ad Vincula. No inscription, no monument, nothing to remind the world that here lay the woman who had once worn the crown of England. To be erased so completely, was this not Henry's final act of domination? To deny her even the dignity of death, to reduce her from majesty to obscurity, was to attempt to erase her very existence. But death was not enough. Henry VIII wanted Anne gone from memory as well as from life. Her portraits were removed from halls, her badges and emblems destroyed, her name spoken only in whispers. It was a deliberate purge, as though she had never been queen, never given him a daughter, never altered the course of England's history. Yet the attempt to erase Anne backfired in ways Henry could not control. Whispers of her wit, her intelligence, and her cruel fate lingered in the minds of commoners and courtiers alike. The woman Henry tried to obliterate became a ghost, haunting the Tudor court and the nation's conscience. In trying to silence her, he ensured she would never be forgotten. Anne's death did not end with her. Those who served her, who loved her, who simply stood as witnesses to her fall, carried scars that never healed. Her ladies-in-waiting, tasked with dressing her for the scaffold and catching her severed body, were left broken in spirit. Some abandoned court life entirely, retreating to convents or the countryside. For them, the memory of Anne's trembling prayer, her final words, and the thud of the blade became a torment that followed them until their own deaths. It was said that some who attended the execution suffered nightmares for years, unable to shake the sight of her twitching body. Was this not, in its own way, a curse? Even Henry's court was not spared. Whispers of Anne's ghost wandering the tower began almost immediately, a spectral reminder of injustice. Have you ever felt the weight of a memory so heavy it shapes the rest of your life? For many who saw Anne die, that memory was inescapable. Her fall was more than an execution. It was a trauma that infected all who witnessed it. While Anne's body lay in an unmarked grave, Henry VIII wasted no time. Within days he was engaged to Jane Seymour, and within weeks he married her. The speed of this union revealed the brutal truth. Anne had become expendable, a pawn removed once she no longer served his desires. The court spun the story to its advantage, painting Henry as merciful for granting Anne a sword instead of an axe, framing him as a just ruler rather than a tyrant. It was propaganda at its most ruthless. Yet no matter how carefully the narrative was controlled, a deeper truth endured. Anne Boleyn's fate stands as a stark reminder of how power can twist justice, how history can be rewritten by those who hold the crown. She was meant to be erased, yet centuries later her name remains alive, her story retold not as a tale of treachery, but as one of injustice and haunting resilience. When authority rewrites truth, what is left for us to believe?